I'm very happy to be here. My name is Frank Preiss from BMW HG in Munich. And today we are showing you a very interesting approach Mark came up with and what we are implementing on the BMW side. For myself, I have 25 years experience in software development, most of the time in agile software development. I started as a programmer, eventually became a software architect, working as a Scrum Master, as an IT project lead, and as a product owner in a scaled agile environment. And at the moment, I have the role of a so-called domain agile master. So this is what BMW uses as a scaled role for a Scrum Master. I will come to the details later, and now I hand over to Mark, who will do the first part of the talk.
Yeah. So my name is Mark. I'm a certified less learner, helping organization to deal with less and agile approaches. But one of the tackles all my clients have is if you do that right, less right, with budgeting, all the stuff, you won't need that. But whenever you have the circumstances that someone is asking how much will it cost, when are you done, then that might be helpful. So what are we going to do? I will introduce a little bit the approach, the algorithm behind that, the thinking, and then you will have a lot of on-site, hands-on experiences, what that approach might change in your organization. I was by myself very impressed about that, what Frank was reaching at his company. So he will do the deep dive case study for you, and then we will have a Q&A session. So what was my motivation? I already elaborated a little bit. So I see most companies struggle with becoming agile and still having that mindset of what will be the costs and when are you done? So reporting on milestones. And so this is where you think, how can we combine, so somehow predictable product development and incremental product development, which might be a contradiction, but the challenge of that is extremely visible in the product owner role. So especially in reporting to higher management or to other stakeholders, because they request these fixed scope, fixed cost mindset. But even if you are in a less adoption, usually we have that principle, deep and narrow, over broad and shallow, and that will require that you start small and that the outside, non-less adoption environment will have integration needs with you so that you, that's not working with the pointer, so that you might agree on bigger milestones because the company, the rest of the outside of the less organization is not really following these sprint cycles even, might be even that. So if you collaborate with others and you have to integrate with that, that's especially a problem then that you have to report on that. So, and how do we do that in the agile world? That's easy. We have a burn down. We have the velocity, and we can say when we are done, right? But the major problem is, what is the remaining backlog? How do you determine that? So, and one technique most of the teams do is they estimate the whole bunch of the backlog, which in depth means that you have a pre-analysis phases before you start implementing. And that's a sequential life cycle. That destroys your agile approach, because then it's a sequential life cycle. This is one of the problems. And when it comes to deadlines, as you saw in the graph, velocity is a key, and velocity is usually measured in the change of the status you have, and therefore every item in your backlog needs to have the same status model. So no deviations on that would be possible. Would be nice to have there, and that means what is in backlog item. Scrum doesn't say anything about that. Even less doesn't say that much about that. So that can be a very huge thing, or it can be a very tiny thing on that. So, and many people think then about, okay, what would be a right backlog structure? So in the less books, in the second one, we elaborate a little bit about 3 levels. Maybe a plain list is best, but in large enterprises, it's very hard to have just a plain list. So there might be some structures. And Les is suggesting not more than having 2. 3 was a primary statement on that. Most of you might be familiar with Jeff Patton's story mapping. So you came to that, to themes, epics, and stories. You can do that in that sense, or you can skip the theme and just have 2 levels. That's also okay. But if you have to report on dedicated milestones, I made the experiences, a 3-level backlog is really helpful to get that visibility. Yeah, but most of you might know that we are not against user story mapping, but one of our preferred techniques is take a bite, so cell-based splitting. I'm not explaining that too much, but I would like to say that's a refinement tree. How to come to that? You can derive a product backlog from that, and you can have also 3, 2, or a plain backlog on that. So that's possible. So I take these structure in the product backlog, and then I try to find default values. And that's easy to measure. So you can just calculate the average size of a story. You could even calculate the default size of an epic. And you can calculate the default size of a theme. So you have default values on each of these levels. And exact numbers are always bad. So having a range is much better. But how do you come to the range? And that's quite easy. You could use, I use that, standard deviation. That's an accuracy by 70%. That's not that bad. So you can do that. And if you do that, you end up with the range of that. And the problem with that approach is that can deliver an idea. So whenever you put a theme into the backlog, you can immediately calculate the expected range of your of that item, because you use the primary structure of the backlog. But it can happen that it says, okay, that's 5 person days or 500,000 person days with 70% accuracy. That's true, but completely useless, right? So then taking queuing theory in account. So Don Reinhardson wrote a very nice book and was mentioned yesterday already. And from queuing theory, we know the predictability on a list increases if you have similar items, exactly the same size. That's not possible in product development, but we can work towards that we have similar sliced sizes, especially on these different levels. And on the theme level, it's not that important. If you reach that in stories and epics, that's quite helpful. We can also talk about that in the Q&A session, but I would not go deeper now. So this approach is saying you, if you continue like in the past, this will be your future, most probably. And then you can think about, should I change that? This is the idea. It's not about to have a concrete measure and a concrete answer on this will be the future. It mainly says if you behave like in the past, that would be most probably your future. And you can think about, is this okay or do I need to adopt? So that's the theoretical part of that. How does it look like? So I calculate the items by items which were existing and have, for instance, numbers. So you calculate the average, minor, and max, and then you add it to the items which were not yet estimated. and then you calculate the next area, and then you apply that to that, and then for themes, and then I have a color code. Every existing item in the backlog gets a color according to the state. So red is open or not refined, ready is blue, in progress is yellow, and then we have some green, resolved, and closed on that. And then you can measure 3 different backlog sizes. That's what I do. And if you have done that, then you get 3 different pie charts, which is an equivalent to the project or product progress. So this is the best case, only a few unknown, you have much more, and you see in that example you have a huge range of backlog sizes, and that means there is a lot of uncertainty. And you could then think about, okay, do I invest more in breaking down epics to get rid of this? But you have that under control. You can compare that to the used budget or to the remaining budget you still have. That would be also possible. On a deeper level, so that was the product backlog overall. And on a deeper level, we visualize, so the epics, I see that these epics are not touched yet. They just got their default values, but you also see at the above there that there are epics or themes worked on. There is some uncertainty, not yet. There is some default values in there, which a team hasn't looked at that. You can also see immediately that the teams are not focused, right? They work on many different things here, and you can act on that. And you see here as well, and that's why where the deviation is quite high, is that there are epics with 1 user story, and there are epics with 45 or 43 user stories, and therefore you see that this range comes up. And you can act or react on that. So this is also from a real project example. So nearly the forecast for 2 years, and you see above the forecast related to the different scopes, and the burn down is the average velocity of the organization. So you see, if it's the average scope and the average velocity, we might have a touchdown. But if it's the maximum backlog, remaining backlog, we won't have a chance. Nearly the half will not be implemented. Okay, if it's a minimum, we will end up a little bit earlier. But as you see in the curves, that they are slightly going up, it's not likely that the final scope will be between the average and the minor scope. It's more likely that it's above the average scope. And therefore, you could immediately react on that and talk to customers. Maybe you can also have more money and spend more people so that the curve gets steeper. This is one chart where you can have them, but the yellow one here is related, or this chart is related to the maximum minimum velocity and the average scope. And there you see, okay, average scope, maximum velocity, super, we are in a good shape. But if we have the minimum velocity, even the average scope will become a problem. And then you can quite early react on that. And of course, 2 years reporting is maybe a little bit too much, but that's an optimal curve, but from a project. So 4 cycles, you go in with a huge deviation, or with at least a deviation between the uncertainty of the 3 remaining backlog sizes, and over time, where you learn and do invest in refinements, it converges, right? And that's quite nicely seen here, and they met the target in their 4 sprints. And what you see here is the same. So there were the curves, and that's one here is, this says at the last sprint, if you have your average and maximum velocity, you will be done in that sprint. If it's a minimum velocity, you won't be done in your sprint. That's the idea. And the more often you take these smaller steps, in the reporting and you met your targets, the more likely is it that the overall reporting or visualization and forecasting for more than 2 years will be also somehow close to the reality. This is the idea. And absolute numbers, that's our snapshots, and that they are always maybe wrong, but this is a trend. When does the Excel say when you are done? And these are the sprints. This is the date where you are done. And you see here that at the beginning, the best case was, okay, you make it. In the average velocity, you won't make it, and minimum, you won't make it as well. So there is some criticality, and based on these numbers, you can take actions. Maybe you rescope something, maybe you add more people, and then you should see that the prediction of that approach will come closer to the target date you have promised. And if there is something which is going in a different direction, you can be sure that your measures are not correct or doesn't help you to reach your targets. This is more related to that. So cumulated flowchart, maybe know that from Jira. That also, it's the same stuff, but what you can see here is that expected remaining backlog, which are no estimates there, which are no deeper information about that. It's visualized gray. Usually it should be horizontal. And if it's not the case, like here, you see you have an ever-growing backlog. And this is a problem because that means you won't be done, right? And that's also helpful and visible. And then I have a few more graphics showing these forecasts for dedicated components. That's sometimes important. Or you can have feature bundles put together and say, okay, that's a progress here. There are some uncertainties still not done in the features, where you can see that people are working on features which are not that important at the moment. That could be also possible. And I like this one as well for teams, where you can see at the middle of the sprint when a team might be done with some of the items they have, what should they do next? Should they take from the backlog the next item to deliver to deliver more value, or should they more invest in analyzing and refinement the next stories to keep the next sprints done? And that's just easy. That team has enough stories in ready, right? They could take the next one. But that team has none of the stories in state ready. So that means the next sprint might be endangered because they do not know what to do. So this could also help. That was from my side, and now I hand over to Frank.
Thank you, Mark. So before I will show you how we really utilize Mark's approach and how it helps us, some introducing words. So BMW, I think, is well known to the most of you with our brands, and we have a special relation to Berlin, of course, with the BMW Motorrad plant here in the city and celebrating 100 years of BMW Motorrad this year. And I brought our strategy with us because it reflects on how we act in the company and what is our North Star. It's BMW Group exists to move body, heart, and mind. And maybe this sounds a little bit pathetic, but it's really the core of our company and what we aim for. So I'm working for the BMW Group IT. And to give you an idea on how big this is, we have sites in 29 countries. We maintain literally thousands of applications worldwide. And we have a BizDevOps set up across the whole globe, including our providers, with in total 66 domains and around 300 products. And I want to emphasize what is behind those 66 domains and the 300 products. Before we introduced the agile working model, and I come to this in a moment, we were having 11,000 application teams, right? Teams responsible for applications. And you can imagine what effort that was to really orchestrate all the noise behind those applications. And with the introduction of the agile working model 5-6 years ago, we really were able to narrow this down to those 60 domains and 300 products that are delivering the value for BMW and, of course, of our end customers. My field of action is a domain that is called Service and Repairs Parts Lifecycle Management, quite a lengthy name. So in general, we take care of everything happening in customer support. So all the whole system landscape that is necessary, that our dealers, that third parties, and of course the headquarters and the markets are able to provide the customer support to our end customers. This is in our field of action and in my responsibility. So the domain I'm responsible for, together with the domain owner on the business side and the domain owner on the IT side, consists of 12 products. We maintain around 190 applications. The team consists of 60 biz DevOps teams spread around the globe. We have 150 employees on the BMW side in headquarters, 60 employees working in the hubs, and the workforce is extended by, in total, 33 external providers. And you can easily do the math, how many people are working in the domain by just taking the number of biz DevOps teams and thinking of 8 to 10 people per team. So there's quite some noise. And from an Agile Master perspective, of course, taking care of 60 teams and then not doing this alone, obviously. This is together with a team of Scrum Masters and Agile coaches. It's quite some work, and it's a lot of joy to work with all those colleagues. Agile working model. I already said that we introduced this quite a while ago, and the main benefit of this is that this is really closely related to our business processes and to the organization itself, so how BMW is organized around the business processes and the agile working model supporting this. So we have a hierarchical structure there, starting with the so-called prime. These are the basic business processes across the whole company, providing the overall life cycle of our products. And below the primes, we have the domains. One of them I just showed you. The domains are clustered into products. Some of the products, the bigger ones, are clustered into sub-products. And of course, the foundation of this are our biz DevOps teams that are really providing the value. And the AWM itself is, and I would say this is a very good approach if you want to introduce agile at scale in a big company, is a generic description of a scaled agile framework. So we do not force teams to either choose less or safe or any other framework, but we really emphasize this mostly on the domain level to choose an appropriate framework that fits to the state of maturity the teams are in their agile transformation. So in our domain, we are adopting less. And so the domain translates into less speak as the product, and our products translate into areas in less. And this is reflected in the JIRA as well. So we have exactly the three-tier structure that Mark already mentioned. We do not call it theme, we call it saga. Below the sagas are the epics, and then, of course, stories, tasks, defects for the teams. What we have additionally is that we have agreed on a very simplified workflow across the whole company, so not just in our domain, but really across whole BMW, how we interact with the Jira items in Jira. And so this makes it a lot easier when it comes to synchronizing events and working together across products and domains. And as Mark already said, milestones are an important element for us to synchronize again across the whole company. Yeah, BMW is over 100 years old, and we are very used to dealing with milestones. And if you think of a new product development, we have this one milestone that is not questionable. It's the so-called SOP, the start of production. So when a new product really gets produced the first time in a plant, or most of the time multiple plants across the globe, and all the activities have to be synchronized to this milestone. Like in our case, being ready for supplying or providing the customer support processes for this new product. So when Mark and I joined the domain 2.5 years ago by accident. So we knew each other from less trainings, but Mark was working supporting one of our products in the domain, and I took over the role as the agile master for the domain. And so we were facing quite a lot of challenges. So only real cross-product topics. So when I now talk with product, this is BMW speech, right? You can translate this to less areas. So only cross-product topics were really visible, but with no real clue sometimes about the real timelines. Of course, the product owners somehow knew, and with some magic, it was always possible to reach the deadlines, because this was not, it was not possible to fail, right? But it was a lot of crunch. It was a lot of unhappiness within the teams, and a lot of struggle and efforts to really orchestrate this across the domain. And the most important thing on this slide is really the last point. We were facing the situation that there was no real awareness of the need to understand that all the teams are responsible creating a certain goal or reaching a certain goal together. We had those classical silos. It was mentioned in other talks across the conference as well. Of course, all based on what we were used to, the ITPM phases. So first of all, doing exploration, then the design, implementation, integration, and with everything that comes with it, especially playing the blame game, right? Why something is not working as we thought in the end, and who is the culprit for this. So this was the most important point that I wanted to tackle, to give people an understanding of that they had to work closely together. And entering the stage, Mark's approach. The people had this feeling they were not happy, and they knew, well, it's more luck than real plan that we achieve the goals that we want to achieve. So we introduced the Mark's methodology. And what we found out at first is that this is really a struggle, because the product backlogs, and they were scattered across multiple Jira projects, were, well, I can't find another word, they were a mess, right? So, and I guess you have the experience maybe as well. Every backlog tends to get a mess if you do not really constantly maintain it, and if you have the discipline to understand what is important, what not, throwing out unimportant or items that are of no value. So this is the main thing that we did for quite a while, cleaning up and especially introduce a consequent linking across the hierarchy. So this is another advice I could give you, no matter whether you are interested in Mark's approach or not, but if you have a hierarchy, consequently use it and do not allow any orphans, then it's better to have no hierarchy at all and really just have a flat backlog. So what we did as well is defining clear business goals with the customer value behind it, and introducing Saga and Epic splitting based on increments. So we are utilizing cycles at the moment, quarterly cycles, and working in two-week sprints. It was of some of the previous slides. And I think if you have a mature organization, you do not need these cycles. But the cycles at this point in time really help us to gain this understanding, what do we want to achieve within the next couple of months. And not just working sprint by sprint or having a plan that that's running over years. So this is something in between, and it helps people to really understand what is important as one of the next steps regarding a certain feature or a certain feature set. And another thing that we did to introduce a common cadence across all our 60 development teams. So they are now working all in 2-week sprints, and all the sprints are aligned, and all this discussion on when is what ready, when can we have something, this is all done by this. No real news on this slide, right? This is all common sense, I would guess, at least in the LESS community. But it is the base for really making use of Mark's approach. And on the other hand side, Mark's approach showed us that we should really invest this, and not just talking we should, but really doing it. And by that, we were able to, to drive or to get back into the driver's seat and not be driven by the stakeholders and the world around our domain. So, but nevertheless, the first visualizations were kind of frustrating, I would say. Yeah, in 2022, it was like the examples that Mark showed as well. So, whatever we did, the visualization always showed us you will not be able to reach your goals. And I have some of the courses there, and we consequently worked on this. But what is more important is what we learned out of this. And first of all, what we were able to create is a really transparent, understandable, and consequently maintained backlog. And this we did not put everything into one Jira project. They are still scattered across 20 or so Jira projects, our items. But nevertheless, we introduced tools like Jira Plan and, of course, Mark's approach, so that this is really visible and especially understandable what items are connected in what way, and where we have the dependencies and what is important and what not. So the clear prioritization, as already said, especially something Mark mentioned in his talk as well, awareness on the backlog size. Right? Before, was just a bunch of items in Jira with, of course, there were estimations on it, on the story level, but there was no real grasp on size on a product owner level view. And now, what we achieved is that product owners are really able to judge how big is this Saga, how big is this Epic, will it fit into the cycle, do we have to split it? And of course, doing a forecasting whether the whole scope will fit into the timeline or not. We introduced 70-30 planning on the cycle level. So that means we are not taking the full capacity into consideration on a 3-month time frame, but only 70%. Why did we do this? Because we found out if we use the whole capacity, we tend to have this again in a waterfallish approach. Like, well, then I have to commit on a product owner side for 3 months. I will only commit this if I know the exact backlog. So this was counterproductive, and therefore we said only 70% of the capacity may be planned, and the rest is there for exactly all those things that happen across the way. And again, most important thing that we achieved is creating joint responsibility. So we really got rid of the blame game. We had this spirit of we do this together on all levels. So across the teams, before introducing the backlog visualization, we had the situation that teams literally sometimes did not even know of the teams that there are or that were in the same product area. Most of the teams did not even recognize that there are other products in the whole scope. And now we have a complete different situation. We have teams that raise their hands and say, well, we see there is a problem somewhere there. We could support there. This would mean we cannot work on our items, but it's not in the same rank as the one where there is really need. Product owners really celebrating together what they achieved together. And this is, if I could only pick one thing to change, then it's definitely this. So all in all, what the visualization brought us is really a change in mindset. So we moved away from should, could to let's do it. We understand why it is necessary to do those things that come with the agile transformation and really mean it, not just say it. And based on this, having a great outcome. All right, so now I brought one concrete example how we utilize the approach, and especially what measures we derive from it. It's not a perfect example, but I picked it because of that to show you what is possible and what not. So what you see is, in the following slides as well, the pie charts that Mark showed, the cumulative flow diagram, the forecast scope-based, and the forecast and the history of the forecast, so the trends. You have seen all the charts in Mark's presentation already. And what you see here is quite a complex feature with 8 biz DevOps teams working on that. This feature has a very high revenue forecast. So management is highly interested in whether or not this will work out. When this was started in beginning of the year, the teams created the rough roadmap without any Jira items at this point in time. And then something happened around April. So management said, well, this is really, this could really be a cash cow for us. So let's move the deadline significantly forward. So in the original plan was to get this out of the door in June 2024. And management decided that they want to have it in 12/23, so end of this year. And this was when the roadmap showed we need 5 cycles to accomplish this, but only 3 cycles left. So the first thing the team did was, of course, trying to convince management that it's not a good idea to move the deadline so significantly. because they will not be able to deliver the full scope. But they came up with an alternative and said, based on cell-based splitting, if we just concentrate on 2 types, so not the whole portfolio of BMW, but just 2 types, and the 2 types that are, in the context of this feature, really make the main part of the revenue, we can deliver until end of the year with 70 to 80% of the forecasted revenue. And so management said, okay, well, that's still better than expected, because it will be possible to have this as early as possible with a high enough amount of revenue so that this really pays out. Then the team worked. Unfortunately, I had no visualizations before July, but it doesn't matter because the main messages are there as well. So they worked, and as you can see, there was quite some unknown space. So the gray one with either no items existing or items without any estimations. And they did not feel very comfortable in reaching the deadline. So what they did at around end of July is really doing a major refinement on those items that were present but had no, most of them were epics without stories so far, so that they really could decide, is this epic necessary for reaching the deadline or not? And those epics that are necessary to split down into stories and tasks. So, and by that, they were able to narrow down, this was a process, as you can see, from a high degree of uncertainty to a very confident situation and not much deviation between the 3 scenarios. Again, time flows, and the next thing that happened, or what they did, is end of or mid of August, end of August, they said, well, we still are not very confident that we will really reach the deadline. We are pretty sure that there will be some obstacles ahead of us, so we want to narrow this down. And so they again went through the backlog and identified other items that were on the nice-to-have side. So reducing scope, moving this out of the deadline scope. And based on this, and you can see the 3 lines are now pretty close. They are working, but you see what happens at the moment, and therefore I brought it. Again, and exactly what the team was already aware of happened, that they are coming across additional things that have to be done to reach the deadline that were not known before. So this is what what we are all facing, I guess, and what agile software development is about. Not really having this this all clear, but developing this from sprint to sprint and learning sprint by sprint. So they are now running out of the timeline. They even found items that they that introduce new uncertainty as well. But what you can see now, and this is the most recent export from the day before yesterday, that they are able to stop this increase. And if you take a look at the upper right corner, you see that that the red is now in a constant amount, and that well, they have to work on the gray, of course, so there is work to do. And at this point in time, it's rather unlikely that they really can make the deadline, but they know this with 3 months ahead of the deadline, so they can now think of additional measures. So one of the things they they came up with why there is an incline there is obviously the summer break, right? So velocity going down because of vacancies. And another thing that they meanwhile figured out is that one team is simply heavily blocked. And this is something that comes or gets obvious much faster with the backlog visualization, because the team is taking this into account and taking this to the retrospectives and thinking, why do we have this situation and what can we do against it? Yeah, so as said, they have quite some work to do, and it will not be an easy task to really deliver this on time. But hopefully I could show how Mark's approach can be utilized in everyday's work, what we can make out of it. And one thing I forgot to mention, without the visualization, they would not have taken this action. And because simply there would not have been any visibility or awareness for this. And you can imagine if this, without this decline here, you could put this this curve up here, yeah. And so the deviation from the deadline would be much more worse than it is at the moment. Yeah. While this is running in the background, this is it from my side, and hopefully we have time for some questions now.